did one.
Okay, we're live.
Hi, and welcome back to Mentor Mondays. I hope you all had a great weekend. Our summer is winding down, school is starting, and we are so excited to announce that today, Kadin Academy has started. And we are so excited to have our first mentors in the course, our legal mentors, Amanda and Shabnam of Brandon Branch. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And as always, my lovely co-host, Jamie Cooper.
Hi, good afternoon for me.
Good afternoon from Michigan.
From Michigan.
So we're very excited to have our legal team on Q&A with us today. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what we can look forward to in their module, the legal module, Get Your Legal House in Order. And then, as you know, we open it up for Q&A after. So please get those questions ready. Jamie will be moderating that. And welcome, Amanda and Shabnam. I have to tell you, when you agreed to come on as our legal team, I did not realize what I was getting with the two of you.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Kira. I know what she was about.
Lots of good things. Your reputation precedes you. Everywhere I go and I mention the two of you, Brandon Branch, I get doors opening for me because you have such incredible credibility in the industry. You've done a lot of good and a lot of hard work for a lot of small businesses in this industry. And I'm really excited to kind of get into what you're providing our students in your module. So why don't you just kind of give me the 5 lessons that you're going to be teaching and some of the stuff you're going to be going over, just kind of top level, and see what we can get into a little conversation about. So go ahead, tell me what your module is about.
Sure. Thanks, Kira. So Shabnam and I are intellectual property attorneys, first and foremost, and we work almost exclusively with cannabis entrepreneurs. And so our module is a legal module overall, but we're definitely going to focus in on some intellectual property stuff, what you can be doing to protect your brand, what you can be doing to exploit the value of your intellectual property, things like that. So we're going to start with kind of an overview of how the various rules and laws at the state, federal, and local level interact with each other and how they shape the landscape for your business. And then we're going to get into the meat of the things that we focus on because, cannabis compliance is important. It's very local. So we're going to give you some tips on how to find the right local cannabis compliance attorney for you. But intellectual property is something that is incredibly important to all businesses, but in particular to cannabis businesses. And we'll delve into that a bit more. So we're going to really dig into those details, and we're going to teach you things like what forms of intellectual property are available to cannabis companies and how do you select a strong brand, right? You're in this landscape where everyone's coming on board, everyone's choosing a brand, and there's a lot of saturation. So how do you stand out? And, we're not going to talk about it from a marketing standpoint, the way that Kira and others are, but we're going to talk about it from a legal standpoint, which really does overlap. And having a good brand is typically synonymous with having a brand that you can actually protect and then license to other people and things like that.
I find that very interesting because, when most people look at building their brand, they do a Google search to make sure no one else has it, and that's the extent of it.
Yeah.
Right? So tell me a little bit about what kind of trouble people can run into if they don't have the legal protection around their brand.
Well, that's a really good question. The people who do a Google search are actually far ahead of the people who only do a domain name search at GoDaddy. We get a lot of that as well. There's a lot of pitfalls if you are not mindful in selecting a trademark that is protectable. Starting from sort of the least bad thing that can happen is that you've just picked a mark that a lot of other people are using or that is descriptive of your goods and services, and either the law is just simply not on your side, so you can't develop that strength, you can't protect it, or from a marketing standpoint, the SEO tends to be really hard. Attorneys like to say, when you pick a name that a lot of other people are also using, every time you spend $5 on your marketing budget, 4 of it is going to your competitors and only 1 is going to you. So there's a huge financial downside, but to be frank, that's sort of the best case scenario if you pick a mark and develop a brand around something that is ubiquitous or is descriptive. And then on the far end is if you pick something actually that's infringing. And infringing is a big deal. It can be a trademark or a branding element that somebody else in the cannabis industry is using, or worse yet, that somebody in the mainstream world is using. And the worst case scenario is if somebody who's quite famous in the mainstream world is using. Amanda and I have had people come to us and say, well, gosh, I'm going to buy the domain marlboroweed.com. They don't own it yet. And then I'm going to try and sell it back to Marlboro. It's funny because that underlying concept, actually buying domain names and selling them, that's a version of that is a legitimate business. But the infringing version of that subjects you to claims of cyber squatting, anti-cyber squatting claims, and actually can carry statutory damages. And then in the trademark infringement world, you can be subject both on an individual level and as a company level to infringement. And if somebody can prove their damages, and most companies in operation can, you are subject to a huge financial exposure. That's going to scare your investors away. It's going to scare your customers away. It's not a good idea. And I should say, sort of in the middle of this, which is also a very high risk, big downside issue to picking a mark that potentially other people have, is that you might expose consumers to risk and consumers to harm. If you have a product that is in particular targeted for the medical cannabis community and you use the same name as somebody else, and the consumer doesn't have the same expectation, doesn't have the same outcome from a mistake they made. They thought your product was somebody else's product or the other way around. They consume that product and they have a bad experience. That's bad for you. It's bad for them. It's bad public relations. It can actually lead to a lawsuit. And we see this kind of thing going on in Colorado, where there's lawsuits either within the industry or from government agencies or people who've been injured against cannabis companies. So there's a lot of downsides to making mistakes, basically, from the outset in terms of treatment selection.
I had none of that had even crossed my mind. That's really interesting. So I just want to back up one of the things that you said about SEO and a good brand. And when we started Kadin Academy, I had other names in mind that Amanda absolutely refused to allow me to do. But it's great because it pushed us to come up with a name that's pretty meaningful. And now if you Google Kadin Academy, we own the front page.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefit to that. And it may take some time, but I'll tell you what, that extra 2 months we spent going back and forth figuring out the name was worth it. So thank you for that. Sometimes you really do have to listen to your lawyer. It does
every once in a while. We know what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great
All right,
example that is too, because if the time and money we spend now developing that connection in people's minds between Kadin Academy and business development or learning educational component, that is going to pay off for us. We then consume, like you're saying, the whole field. Somebody gets even sort of close to us with a name similar to Kadin. Maybe they do consulting services and their name sounds similar. It's identical. We have actually a lot of latitude in enforcing our mark. Mm-hmm. Had we picked, green training .com, we wouldn't have that. There could be green trainers, there could be greenies, there could be a bunch of, and we would not be able to do anything about that. Like you're saying, the SEO, maybe we'd be on the second page of that Google search. That's not where you want to be.
And this is a really nuanced point too. Some people go a little beyond a Google search, which is great. They go to the trademark office database and they do a search there. And we'll have people come to us and say, well, I searched and the name is available. And what they usually mean is, no one else has applied to register that exact same mark. But as Shabnam's saying, if your brand is Green Trainers, then the fact that Green Training is taken may not be that relevant. But if your brand is Kadin, then a different spelling, Kayden, Caden, those would be incredibly relevant. You're not going to capture those in a search. So, it's a nuanced analysis. It's complicated. A search is just a starting point.
Wow. So get your trademarks checked out. And Amanda and Shabnam go through all of the ins and outs that you need to understand. You've got worksheets to figure out to make sure that your trademark is not infringing on others, or to make sure that you're clear actually with the name that you have. So that's awesome. Okay. So that's just one module. What's the second module about?
Well, let's go really quickly back to that first module. Actually, one of the things that we talk about is assembling your legal team. I'm a lawyer, and I've actually had to hire lawyers before. And I'll tell you that even I, as an attorney, have made the mistake of hiring the wrong lawyer that was not well suited to my needs or whose personality didn't agree with mine. And I think one of the most important things you can do and do for yourself is to assemble that right team and ask the right questions from the outset. Your attorney-client relationship is a big deal. This is somebody who is going to hold your hand and be alongside you for potentially years, the duration that you own the company, and they are going to be involved in growth, in strategy. Your company is like your baby, and your lawyer in some ways is a co-parent. And you really want to be asking the right questions. Don't just grab the first trademark attorney that walks in the door, or the first corporate compliance attorney that walks in the door, or the first tax person that you meet. And we have provided a little bit of guidance on the questions to ask, sort of who maybe the top 3 team members might be, and then who might be some secondary considerations. It's a really big deal. I've actually had to hire and fire several attorneys in the handling of some of my personal matters. And I really wish that somebody in those areas of law had told me what questions to ask so that I wouldn't have just handled. In one case, I hired a law firm, but the person I was told to hire was on vacation, and I allowed them to just sub in somebody else. And I later found out that other person had a distinctly different reputation and a 180-degree different way of handling something, which ended up actually waiving some rights for me and really doing some long-term damage to my case. And so this idea of assembling and picking your attorney is a really big deal. And you don't just want to, run into this relationship. Most attorneys will give you an opportunity to correspond with them on the telephone briefly for a few minutes. Some of them might charge you an initial consultation fee. In most cases, it's worth it to go through that initial vetting and make sure you're working with somebody who you like and who has the same approach. The cannabis industry is rife with so much risk. You're going to find attorneys operate on the same spectrum of risk that your business will. So if you're very risk averse, you're going to want an attorney who's going to coach you through that. You don't want someone who's really trying to push the envelope, giving you advice that you aren't comfortable with. So you really got to think about that when you're bringing in counsel.
That is really good advice. And I think it's exceptionally good advice for women. Because we tend to, all right, that's fine. Yep. So-and-so recommended. That's what they said. I don't want to push. Yep. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to be.
Oh my God, that's so true. I did that to myself 2 years ago. As an attorney. Yeah. I did that. Exactly that. Oh, okay.
You're the expert.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't ask. Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing we talk about in this module is, unfortunately, you need more than one attorney. And that's the case generally as a business owner. It's particularly the case in the cannabis industry. We run a bar association for cannabis attorneys because cannabis business attorneys are kind of a new category. It's been a criminal issue until recently. Thank goodness it's changing. And so we've been hosting events where we see, the attorneys that run the gamut, all kinds of different attorneys who serve the cannabis industry. There's no such thing as a cannabis attorney. There are attorneys who focus on cannabis compliance or focus on cannabis related intellectual property like we do. But if you think you can go to one attorney for everything you need, you really need to take a step back and reevaluate that. Maybe one firm will have multiple attorneys who can serve your needs. But one of the things that we really get into in that first lesson is, assessing your needs. What kind of business are you? And then the worksheet that accompanies that lesson helps to go through the different types of needs you may have so that you can start to figure out which attorneys might be more important for me, which ones do I need to start off with, who can I hold off for a little later. But it is important, unfortunately, to have more than one attorney on your team. So you want a good one. You want good ones if you're going to, have a bunch.
So can I ask you, what is the worst thing that you've seen happen because people were not protected? Because they thought that an IP attorney would cover them for everything. What is the risk here of not actually protecting your business in this way?
Well, I think obviously the biggest risk is not having an attorney who's organized your entity in a way that makes you lawful and compliant in whatever state you're in. And the fact is you still have criminal exposure. Like Amanda's saying, it used to be a criminal defense practice, and now a lot of that garden variety criminal defense work is drying up. But once states implement a regulatory system, basically it invites enforcement around that system. So The worst thing you can do is either not have counsel or use an attorney who doesn't understand the statutory and regulatory system in your state to organize your company. Number one, you need to be legal within your state, because if you're touching the plant, and in even some non-plant touching cases, you are exposed at a federal level. So you absolutely need to be lawful at a state level. So that's sort of the worst thing that can happen if you're using the wrong kind of attorney. And a good attorney will just tell you that they don't do that. Amanda and I will just tell you, we're not going to form your entity. We don't practice that kind of law. The other version, which we actually see a lot of, it's where a non-IP attorney has done some IP work for you. And it's either a completely non-IP attorney or, and I love my patent counsel friends, but a patent attorney who tries to dabble in trademark, or the other way around, a trademark attorney, which you don't see that as much. Trademark attorneys don't tend to dabble in patent because it's so highly specialized, but because trademark looks like something a patent attorney can do, some try and do that crossover. But we've inherited many cases where people have found themselves embroiled in a dispute at the Trademark Trial and Appeal Board, totally unnecessary. We had a case where another company with a similar name as our client was being prosecuted by county council in Southern California, and our client was named in that suit, and they had to bring in several different types of attorney, litigation attorney, compliance counsel, us, to handle that. We've seen rights waived because somebody applied to register a trademark but didn't see the application through, and then it was either abandoned or maybe they didn't see a dispute through.
I think in general, if an attorney says, like, that's not my specialty, but I can do it, that's a red flag. You know, like, if it's not our specialty, we don't do it. We would say, if that's not my specialty, I will refer you to someone who can do it. You know, so we do get that a lot. People love to dabble in trademark. It's just not something you should dabble in. And so, you end up spending a lot more money to hire the right attorney after you've hired the one who, I can figure it out. Sure. Like, no, don't do that.
Okay. So make sure that you're getting the right attorney for the needs at the moment. Not all cannabis is equal when it comes to the law. So you need a variety of different lawyers, which you will go over in that lesson. And then you need to make sure that you actually like these people, that you get along with them, and you feel like they are actually on your side and they're going to do right by you. And you have every right to demand that that is a good relationship.
Yes. Or end the relation. You know, if you're working with an attorney and you decide it's not working out, go work with someone else. That's fine. You know, like they shouldn't take it personally if they do. That's their problem. You know, you should feel empowered to take care of your needs with your business and trust your instincts. If it doesn't seem like they're serving your interest well, you know, sometimes this communication style is just different. We have some clients who want us to be constantly in touch. They really like phone calls. Other clients, I don't need to talk to you for months, whatever. Reach out when there's something, talk to my, assistant, don't bother me. And that's all fine. But you and your attorney need to come to an agreement on that. And if you can't, find another attorney.
Okay. All right. What's the next module all about?
Well, we kind of jumped into brand distinctiveness because it's probably our favorite, but I think that's actually the third module. So the second module is an overview of intellectual property types, because, you might be hearing us talk about trademark and you're thinking, wait, trademark, copyright, patent, wait, what are these differences? And, it's not your job to know the differences. And so we always like to start out with kind of an overview of what do we mean when we talk about these different terms that often get confused. So we go through that and then we talk about how each of these things applies to the cannabis industry, what kinds of IP you might have in that category and whether they can be protected. And in fact, spoiler, tell you what's in the module, all of the forms of IP can be protected for cannabis companies with one very minor exception where you would need to send a clipping of your plant to the federal government, and we don't recommend that you do that. But otherwise, everything is available to you. It's not simple necessarily how it's protected, and that's why you really want to work with cannabis specific IP counsel, but they are available to you. And so we hear a lot of misinformation out there. People think, I'm a cannabis company, so I can't take advantage of this or that protection because it's federal protection. You can understand why they think that, but we really spend some time in this module kind of disabusing you of that notion and explaining how the protection does work.
Wow, there's a lot to learn in this module. And I know for myself until I sat down with an attorney and actually had the difference between a trademark and a copyright and what can be copyrighted, what can be trademarked. It gets kind of murky, and we tend to make a lot of assumptions about what's protected. Well, I heard that if I just put it up online, I'm protected, or
I mail it to myself. Yeah.
Yes.
Where did that come from? We have no,
I
like,
know.
it's, that's a waste of a stamp. Don't do it.
You heard it here first, ladies. Do not mail yourself your content and expect it to be copyrighted.
Unless you just really like getting mail
Right.
and
Go
you want
ahead,
to
mail.
feel like, oh, someone else.
Mailbox. All right, Jamie, do we have any questions so far in our Q&A?
Right now, there are no questions, but I encourage our audience to go ahead and submit your questions in the comments feature there on the Facebook page.
All right, next module. Our next lesson, sorry,
I
next
think
lesson.
the next
In your
lesson
mind.
is about enforcement. Lesson 4 is about enforcement of your intellectual property. So in particular, well, actually, no, we don't just focus on brand. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. What, it all comes together. It'll all fit together. We're a little murky on which is which, but one of the modules is about enforcement of your intellectual property. What to do if you think you see someone infringing your IP. Maybe they stole a photograph from your blog. Maybe they are using a brand that's really, really similar to yours. Maybe your employee went to a competitor business and all of a sudden that competitor business is doing a lot of the same things that you do that you think of as your secrets. And where did they get that? And what do you have to do about it? On the flip side, maybe you got a demand letter from another cannabis company or a big company like Hershey's or Gorilla Glue saying, hey, you're infringing our intellectual property. So we talk about what to do. And, as you'll hear in most of the lessons, one of the first things we say is talk to an attorney. And so, it is really important, especially when you're looking at infringement on either side, to talk to an attorney and find out what your rights are. But we help you kind of go through and figure out how to identify if there is infringement in the first place and what that infringement looks like, depending on what type of intellectual property is being infringed.
So what kind of options do you have? So let's say we find somebody Cadin. And they came up after us, but they are trying to do even, let's just say something not education related, but it's in cannabis. And I feel like, I'm not real happy with it, but they're the name of a dispensary or the name of a strain. What can I do?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, the answers kind of range depending on these things that you said, depending on what they're doing. And so like Amanda was saying earlier, because Kadin is a very distinctive name, in particular in light of what it is that we offer, we can do a lot of things. So let's say there's a Kadin that is a consultant. And let's say they're based out of Massachusetts and they're offering consulting services to cannabis businesses. That would warrant a demand letter.
Yeah.
That's pretty,
down.
very close to what we're doing.
Yeah.
Very, very close to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that would warrant a demand letter. And so the lens through which we analyze this are the likelihood of confusion factors. So the legal test for infringement is whether there is a likelihood of confusion among consumers about the source or affiliation of among the two different brands and products, goods and services. So in that case, we think that there would be a high likelihood because the marks sound identical. They might look similar. They might mean the same thing. In this case, if you just said them, they would mean the same thing. And then we would analyze the similarity or the relatedness of the services. And educational services in the cannabis industry is really close to consulting services. We are going to operate in the same trade channels and the same sales channels. We're looking at the same consumers, the same customers. So we'd have a really strong case. So because your lawyer would go through this analysis, she'd say to herself, you have a strong case. So I'm going to write a demand letter and I'm going to ask this person to cease using the mark. In this type of situation, the trademark lawyers say the only question is a question of priority because the marks are nearly identical and the services are highly related. So really we want to make sure that we're the senior user, the first user, and that we are offering our services nationwide, which we are. We're absolutely in their market, in their jurisdiction, right? We're sort of hitting all these elements. We're around before them. And in the United States, your trademark rights arise out of use. We don't need to have a registration of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So we've been using our mark. We've been advertising it. We've now actually offered our services. So yeah, this would warrant a very strong demand letter. Let's say it was a dispensary that hung out its shingle still in Massachusetts. Yeah, so they're a little bit more regional. They're not looking at growth. Is there going to be confusion? So go through the same analysis, right? Is somebody realistically going to think that an educational service is affiliated with or sponsored by a dispensary, vice versa? I think actually maybe.
I think there's an argument.
I think there's an argument
Mm-hmm.
to be made that maybe.
Mm-hmm.
If that dispensary was in Northern California, where two of the founders and educators of this organization are based out of, where we're inevitably going to be in more of the same trade channels
Mm-hmm.
and among the same consumers, probably a heightened. Now we're sort of heightening that risk.
We could also, we might consider sending like a notice letter in that
Right.
case, which is where we don't necessarily say, you need to stop using this brand right now, you're causing confusion. We say, listen, you may be using this with dispensary services, but we're using this with education and providing information about cannabis. So we're going to be watching you to make sure you don't provide any education or information on your website.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you enter into our territory, basically. And sometimes that's enough to get them to say, you know what, it's not worth it. We don't want to be in a fight with these people. People respond to all different ways to demand letters, but sometimes that's all it takes, just a little bit of push. And, if you catch someone when they've just started, it's a lot easier to convince them to
Right.
change their brand than 5 years down the road when you have a very different situation. So sometimes, just putting them on notice works.
What do you say to women who, I don't want to be mean, it just seems like a lot of money and they're over there and, I don't want to be known as somebody who likes to sue. What do you say to women who have that kind of hesitation to go after people who are using their mark because they feel like it's not very nice?
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, it isn't just women that do this, but it is a thing that women have a tendency to do, want to keep the peace. So that's a great question. And you don't have to be mean about it. First of all, we don't have to write nasty letters. We do sometimes when it's appropriate and we enjoy that. But, we can write a perfectly nice letter. Hey, you may not have realized that this is already our brand. And we're very concerned about consumers in the cannabis industry not being confused about where their medicine comes from or, things like that. We hope we can all work together. We have better things to do than fight over names. Let's, try to select something new. The other thing, though, is that you're not just doing this to pick a fight. You're doing this to protect your business and your investment. So think about if you're an infused products manufacturer and you find someone making edibles under a similar brand and you don't say anything because, well, they're in another state or, they're down south in California, I'm in Northern California, or, the brands are spelled a little differently. Now, let's say that person has a products liability issue. Their product gets consumed by a child and Maureen Dowd writes an article about it. Or they release a batch of bad products and everyone gets sick. And then everyone's talking about how that brand caused all kinds of trouble. And how many people do you think are going to think that's you? Now, are you going to rebrand, right? You can't control what that other company does. It's
Good job being
important.
nice.
Yeah. No, being nice doesn't get you very far in that scenario. So you're protecting your company, you're protecting your consumers. It's important to think of it as, it's just like setting healthy boundaries in any relationship. You don't have to be aggressive. You just have to take care of yourself and your business.
And that's also why you hire an attorney. You don't have to write that letter and you won't, and we'll shield you from that. And that's the whole point of hiring an attorney. And in fact, again, back to our personal lives, even attorneys hire attorneys.
Yes.
It is really hard, I think, to be confrontational and run interference on your own behalf. It's very hard to stand up for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's why the gods invented lawyers so that we can stand up on your behalf. It's what people often say about doctor's office visits, right? It's great to take a patient advocate with you. I used to take my spouse with me to my wellness checkups when I was pregnant because I found myself not asking my doctor the questions I wanted to ask her during my pregnancy. Like, how are we finding ourselves in those situations? So if you think that you are one of any number of people who isn't up for the challenge of representing yourself, no problem. That's why lawyers are here. Mm-hmm. You should let us do the job that we're being paid to do, which is defending you, representing you, making sure your brand is strong and is not subject to the kind of public relations and consumer protection issues that Amanda was talking about.
And you can put that on us. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
if the client has a relationship with the potential infringer, they want to reach out directly, but they are afraid to be too mean. We'll ghost write a letter for them that they can send, and they'll say, like, listen, my attorney said I need to reach out. Sometimes we frame it that way, and that's fine. We don't mind being the heavy. That's cool. That's our job. So there are a number of different ways to play it.
So there's a real reframing here of the relationship with an attorney, right? Your attorneys are people who are there to help protect you, stand up for you, and have your back. They're not the evil people who are always just looking to squeeze money out of you, and you don't need them because they're just going to take all your money. That is not the situation. Your lawyers are on your team, they're on your side, and they're going to help you, especially as a cannabis business. Keep your business in business.
Yeah.
Keep you compliant and keep you going, because the whole Gorilla Glue and the issue of having, especially in this industry, a trademark that someone else uses, even a little bit similar, that ends up dragging your brand down, it's totally worth the time that it takes to go and do those checks. And Amanda and Shabnam will show you exactly how to do that check to make sure that no one is infringing on your trademark. And this is really, really important work to do.
Although, unfortunately, we're ultimately going to tell you that you start with the check yourself, and then you have to hire an attorney.
Take it to an attorney. But what if you find something? If you've never looked, if you've never actually learned how to do that process, it could completely blindside you. So even though you may need an attorney to complete it, you're empowered now to be taking those first steps and looking out for yourself. So this is great. I can't wait to do it, because I'm okay when it comes to the legal aspect of things, but I need to shore it up a little bit in my own business as well. So I'm really excited about what the two of you have put together for Kadin Academy. So, and I think we've covered everything in the module now, correct?
There's the last lesson that's on marketing compliance.
Oh, right. Actually, there's some really exciting stuff in the last one. Yeah, we cover some packaging and labeling issues, some sort of general stuff around marketing and advertising. And then we touch on a few kind of issues that are unique actually for any industry, and that is promotions, a few different kinds of promotions. We see in this industry that there's a fair amount of promotions happening, namely a lot of sweepstakes and contests, and they're not always compliant. And in that situation, you have a very highly regulated activity merging with another highly regulated activity. So you can pretty much expect that your state Secretary of State's office or your state Attorney General's office is going to be looking at what you're doing, whether you're doing it online or in a store or however you're doing it. Many states also are prohibiting free giveaways. So you've got to be thinking, when you're doing a promotion, are you doing a free giveaway of a product, and what does that mean for your state regulations? So we touch on that a little bit. And then something that's really big in California, because we have such a strong tradition of medical cannabis and contributing to the world of nonprofits and the medical cannabis community, is what is essentially a commercial co-venture, which is a relationship between a for-profit entity and a nonprofit entity, where the latter makes a contribution to the former makes a contribution to the latter anytime a purchase is made. So a perfect example is, every time you purchase one of my, infused edibles, I will contribute $1 to this charity, down the street. And there's actually state level rules and regulations around how that relationship must function. In some cases, you need to post a bond. In a lot of cases, you need an agreement between the two organizations. And that's another example of where one regulated industry meets another regulated industry. So once you're sort of dabbling in that area, you really should seek counsel to help guide you through that. There's been many times where I've gotten an email from a client about a sweepstakes or a contest, and I'm reading through it and I'm like, hey guys, where's your rules? And, where is this and where is that? And so it's always wise to just check in. That's an area actually that you can your attorney can work in creating something that's more templated, more straightforward, and can move you through the process smoothly each time. So you don't need to run up a lot of bills, but you should definitely be checking in from the outset.
Yeah, so we provide we provide sort of just like a high level, issue spotting in that last lesson, because obviously a lot of this is regulated by state law. We don't get into like exactly what the packaging needs to look like or anything like that, but our goal is to help you figure out what are the components of my marketing and advertising that I may need to run by an attorney, or I'm potentially going to get in some hot water.
Yeah.
So this is really important because I saw this a lot just in social media when I was working with traditional business. And I see it even more so in cannabis. Hey, we've got a great idea. Let's just put 10% off on our Facebook page. Hey, let's do a buy one, get one free. Hey, let's have a contest giveaway. And you tell your social media person, let's run this contest for the next few days on Instagram and Facebook because you think it's no big deal. But it could be putting you not only in jeopardy in the cannabis industry, but also from the SEC. Is that the regulating board there?
The FTC and your state attorney general are usually the two who are going to come after you. And actually, you make a really good point in that.
Yeah.
You know, your cannabis company is already vulnerable on social media, but if you're violating the terms of use of the social media platform when you're running a promotion, which most of them have specific rules as to how promotions may be conducted, they're going to boot you off as well. But when you were saying that, I was actually thinking about a part of the lesson that Amanda covers, which is your presence on social media and what you're asking people to say or what you're adopting as your company's statements simply by including it on your Facebook page or liking it. That kind of stuff is exposure. And what I'm talking about is some of like the health claim stuff or endorsements and things like that.
Yeah, we get into health claims a lot. This is a big problem that we see with cannabis companies. You know, all of us know anecdotally people who've been helped by using cannabis products and have had relief from, you know, various issues. But you can't market that. You still can't. The FDA and also states prohibit making health claims. And what we get into is that what people think of as health claims are actually a lot broader than what you might think. You know, you probably know you can't say your products cure cancer, but did you know that you can't even necessarily say they help with sleep? You know, it's pretty strict. You know, that's a little on the edge, but that you really have to be careful. And so we talk a lot about that. And as Shabnam was saying, it even goes so far as if you sort of incorporate that into your social media presence, if you're on your page and you're looking to see, oh, someone wrote, you know, blah, 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 my product helped with their epilepsy. And then you like that post, whoops, you've just made a health claim. So it's really easy to run a
wow. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. I mean, I guess it's a good thing that in Kadin Academy, when people talk about, you know, we're not selling that as a product. So, oh man, there's a lot to know.
Yeah, when she just said that, both of our mouths go.
Oh man, ladies, you need to know this stuff because Jamie and I cover in social media and marketing a lot of the do's and the don'ts around building your brand, but we do not touch the legal aspect of things. And as Jamie said, both our mouths dropped, and we've been doing this for a while. And I've had Amanda and Shabnam advising me on how to advise other people, and I still didn't know that. So you need to understand this. This is such critical information to keep your brand alive.
Yeah, and what's really great about Kadin is that you are going to have that opportunity to sort of go back and forth. Once they've gone through our module and then they go through the other modules, you can still, the attendee can still come back to us and ask us those questions and sort of cross-reference all the information that they're learning. And there is a direct relationship between all of the sections that we're talking about. Obviously, between what we have to say and the marketing module, there's so much crossover. Amanda and I work closely with marketing agencies, creative agencies, advertising agencies, because what they're doing for a client directly impacts what we're doing and vice versa. And as well, the intellectual property absolutely affects the financial structure, the entity structure, the financing. Oftentimes, we need to counsel our clients, or we need to bring in, actually, I should say, like tax advisors, for instance, or a CPA to counsel the clients on what this means in terms of building out a portfolio, what the tax implications might be. There's all the different modules in Kadin have something to do with each other. They're, you know, and so you really want to go sort of back and forth. Use the office hours to ask the questions. Oh, well, I saw Kira say this thing, and I saw you had said this other thing. How do I make those things work together? Or what, you know, that's the whole idea, is it's sort of they're building on one another.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Because this information, you know, we want to make women business leaders here, right? We want to increase that to 36% of cannabis executives are women. We want to make that 50%, but we are not going to get there unless women are building businesses that are well protected that aren't being shut down and flooded with legal fees because they didn't take care of themselves from the very beginning. So
it was so much cheaper to do it right from the start than to pay someone to fix it.
And if you are in need of an attorney, please reach out to Shabnam and Amanda, because they, as Amanda said, have started the National Cannabis Board Association. So they have how many, 300 lawyers?
Just over 200 right
Yeah.
now.
Just over 200 throughout
All
the
over
U.S.
the country, some in Canada. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a great
So-
resource. It's at canbar.org. It's a nonprofit organization. We don't benefit or profit from it in any way. It's a great resource for people to find counsel, to find attorneys, especially in different states. Or if your attorney, if you know that you're working with an attorney and that person says, oh, you're going to need a tax counsel or you're going to need corporate compliance counsel in a different state, ask your attorney to turn to the Bar Association to build out a team. Because one of the things Amanda and I noticed, which is why we formed the Bar Association, is that the attorneys serving the cannabis industry, especially outside of California, don't know about each other as well. So we formed the Bar Association so they could meet one another and build the kind of teams that we're talking about and have those relationships so that your co-counsel is only a phone call away rather than, having to dig around frantically. So, don't be afraid to ask your attorney to do some footwork and develop a team on your behalf or find people who can co-counsel for them in times when they need it.
Amazing. Thank you for the service that you have done providing and creating this entity. This is amazing.
And we do have some questions coming in.
Awesome. All right.
I'm going to go back. So Sharon asked if you can explain the difference between trademark, patent, and copyright, and what exactly is protected. Like, for example, seed or a type.
Sure. So we'll do a very quick summary of the differences, and we do a much deeper dive in the lessons. So your trademark is your brand. It's the thing that tells consumers where your products come from, tells them about the characteristics of those products. It could be a logo, it could be a tagline, something like that. Copyright is the creative content that you develop and put out there. So photographs, written materials on your blog, videos like this, those are all protectable under copyright law. Software code, another example. It's not just an idea. It has to be an expression of an idea, but that's what copyright covers. And then patents cover inventions. Useful inventions. They could be plants, seeds and plants could be subject to patent protection. They could be a machine for extracting something. They could be a way of doing something. And it could also be a unique design in some cases. So there's a little bit of overlap here between the different types. Excuse me. But generally speaking, that's the difference. In terms of what's protected, it's basically the same for cannabis as for other companies in that sense. Not how it's protected, but what is protected: the brand, the creative content. Plant patent protection is particularly useful for cannabis companies, but there are a lot of strict rules about what is actually subject to protection, and we'll get into that in the module. But it is available. Plant patent protection is available, but the plants have to be we're not scientists, but it's asexually propagated, not through seeds. So it's not the cultivated through the seeds themselves, but the unique characteristics of the plant that you can potentially protect.
Okay. And then the next question is, do you have any opinions on the current situation of the makers of Gorilla Glue adhesive going after the makers of the Gorilla Glue #4 strain over similarities in name, likeliness, images?
So you're talking to the right person, because Amanda was quoted in that article. So they both were quoted in that article. So
The firm was
that's
in
the
the
right question to the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start? All right. Yeah. So for those who are not aware, there's a dispute pending right now in federal court in Ohio between Gorilla Glue, the actual glue company. You may not realize it's not just a cannabis strain. First, it was a glue company, and they're not even like the owners of they would claim they're the owners of the strain per se, but it's a company called GG Strains that may have developed the genetics for the Gorilla Glue strain, as it's called, and they actually certify others as providing the actual strain. So if you think you're selling Gorilla Glue number 4 or whatever, you can go to GG Strains and say, hey, can I have your seal of approval that says this is really Gorilla Glue? So Gorilla Glue has gone after GG Strains and said, hey, stop using our brand. And the complaint alleges that GG Strains specifically chose Gorilla Glue because the strain was so sticky. There's some story that like the guy was like touching a bunch of his product and then he was on the phone and his hands were sticking to the phone and he was like, this is like Gorilla Glue. And they were like, oh, let's call it that. Not a good brand selection strategy. This is like blank famous thing.
It's time for a Kit Kat break. Oh, yeah. Let's call
it that. No. But it does raise some interesting questions because, as Shabnam talked about earlier, the sort of hallmark of trademark infringement is consumer confusion. So one of the questions at issue here is, are consumers going to be confused and think that, for example, Gorilla Glue, the company, is also now making cannabis? The thing is that it goes a little bit beyond that. Trademark infringement covers not just confusion as to the source, who's making it, but also association. So if consumers are confused and think that maybe the glue company is endorsing or, given a license to GG Strains to use their name on their cannabis, maybe people think, oh, I bet Gorilla Glue gets a profit every time GG Strains, sells this cannabis. And they could enter into that relationship if they want to. I suspect they do not. So that's one question. But then there's another claim here. So Shabnam also mentioned earlier that if you are copying a mainstream brand, that's a terrible idea. But it's a really terrible idea if it's a famous brand. And that's a colloquial term, but it's also a legal term of art. And a brand has to be really famous to count as famous under the law. It's like Apple, Disney, Microsoft, things like that are clearly famous. Gorilla Glue may or may not be famous, and this may be what we determine over the course of this lawsuit. They'll have to do surveys to figure out what percentage of the population is familiar with this brand, this company, what they offer. If they are famous, they're entitled to greater protection of their mark. They're entitled to protection beyond those uses that are confusingly similar. They're able to stop companies from using their mark even in a way that's non-confusing. And the theory there is it's diluting the distinctiveness of their brand and potentially disparaging or tarnishing their brand reputation. And you can see how their argument is going to be here that, we're this wholesome glue company, we serve middle America and the kids who need glue, maybe kids don't use it, it's really strong glue, but they, they'll say using it with a cannabis strain is tarnishing the wholesome reputation that we've developed. Who has a really good argument about that is Girl Scouts of America.
Yes.
Speaking
Girl
of
Scout cookies
brand, yeah, Girl Scout cookies is a strain that's used very commonly. But you'll notice that GG Strains is doing this work of certifying others for selling the strains. We aren't aware of anyone who's certifying Girl Scout cookies as a true strain. If there were, maybe Girl Scouts of America would go after them. Right now, we're seeing them just go after dispensaries, telling them to stop using that strain. So anyway, it's going to be a really interesting case to watch. We could talk for probably another hour on it, but we won't bore you with that. But it's
fascinating.
It's pretty interesting. There's an article in the Cannabis that we were quoted in, the Denver publication, and I think there will be one soon, probably in the Chronicle.
Yeah,
because we spoke with someone else for that. So yeah,
it is really interesting, and actually, GG Strains' behavior in certifying is itself fascinating because it's sort of one of the ways for it's one of the ways for a genetics developer, let's say, or somebody who makes clones or who develops seeds to protect that. And it's so interesting because the underlying issues here of whether or not you can protect a trademark for use in connection with a strain of cannabis is itself this like rat's nest of old law mixed with ideas for new law. But what GG Strains is doing is one of the ways to sort of protect a name in connection with a strain. And ordinarily there really isn't such protection. Sort of quick package of information. Yeah, so it is sort of funny too. The one company who appears to be having some success at doing it, just darn it, is doing it with a potentially or allegedly infringing name. So there's multiple layers of of interesting trademark law going on here, like Amanda is saying. I mean, this concept of dilution in regular world of trademark is fascinating. It's mushy. The courts grapple with it. Lawyers grapple with it. It's hard to establish. This concept of fame comes up both in a likelihood of confusion analysis and in a dilution analysis, but with different standards. It's, I mean, it's a textbook. Many trademark lawyers are following this case because of the implications in trademark law and the implications in cannabis, in the world of cannabis trademark law.
Will you keep us posted and
absolutely.
the analysis? Because I think there are a lot of people who are going to be watching this, and I'd love to see it in the group. Just kind of keep us updated, you know, maybe a little video here and there, because I think that there's a lot for us to learn from this case. It sounds like it's multi-layered, and I have a feeling that there are going to be a lot of people who are very interested in keeping track of this. So we have gone long today. Most of our Mentor Mondays are about 30 minutes. We've gone an hour, which I can't believe it went by so fast. You two are just such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. If we've missed any questions, would you mind answering them on the Facebook page?
Sure.
Jamie, do we have any questions that still need to be answered?
Well, we do have a couple of them. One of them was in regards, Amanda, to what you said about if you like a comment. You know, somebody says, "Oh, it helped me sleep," and you like it. You might be get a little heat from that. But somebody says, if you like it from your personal profile, will it reflect onto your business?
Probably not. If you have such a prominent tie, like if your business is, you know, your name, then yes, potentially. But otherwise, no. I'm talking about you liking it from your page. Good question.
And then one other question says, how would one market medical marijuana since health claims are so strict?
Isn't that weird? Really it's question. Like the most counterintuitive. Yeah.
We don't know. Watch yours.
No.
Good luck with that.
Good luck. Yeah.
What if you
work with your attorney? You know, like I said, that like helps you sleep is a little bit on the edge. It's not nearly as bad as like treats insomnia. So there are ways to temper the language and claims you're making, and you know, be a little cute about it. Like, you know, I don't know. I'm not thinking of something right now, but you know, whatever. But get your Z's. Yeah, that might help. So there are ways to improve it. There are some other strategies folks use, like having a completely separate website that talks about the health claims. That is not a safe route. So I don't want to go too much into that here, but you know, talk to an attorney about it, because there are some options that don't eliminate the risk, but potentially reduce it. But yeah, you've identified a ridiculous inconsistency in the law that we have medical products that we can't make medical claims about. We can't call them medical products, except that we have to call them medical products under the law.
And listen, sign up for the Kadin Academy course, because you will get lots of other ideas from Jamie and I about social media and marketing, how you can talk about this. And ladies, you need lawyers. You need to button up. You need to protect yourselves before you do anything else. Get yourself a team of lawyers. Thank you, ladies, so mumuch for joining us today. Thank you for the amazing work on your modules and all of the great information that you're sharing. We all owe you a debt of gratitude for what you're willing to do, because I don't know any other industry where lawyers will be quite as generous with their information and quite as accessible. So we're very, very lucky to have you. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Yay, we are going to move those numbers. I promise. Working together, we will do that. So thank you very much at home for joining us, or from work, in our Facebook page, in our group. If you haven't already, please join Women Entrepreneurs in Cannabis. Shabnam and Amanda are in there regularly. If you've got questions for them, please ask. Jamie and I will be back next week with another Mentor Monday, and we will see you on Wednesday. And I believe this week we're going to have our first Founder Friday, where we're going to be interviewing women who have started cannabis companies and they are successful. So we're going to be able to find out a little bit what that's like, starting your own business in this industry. So we've got our mentors on Mondays, people in the service industries helping us learn how to build our business as well. And then Fridays, we're going to get some inspiration from women who have already built them, and we'll talk about what it's like to be an entrepreneur in this industry. So have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.